So, my ancestors were asked by white men to come to this country, which they had stolen and forced black people to build, because they were hoping that my ancestors would be the new cheap and disposable labor to undercut the recently freed black people that lazy white men didn't want to pay. And when my ancestors wouldn't do that, they were lynched and massacred, their towns were destroyed, they were blown up while building the railroads, and ultimately they were excluded from society in the country for nearly 60 years. Then when the United States asked us to come back in the 1960s because they wanted to put us in the way of black people again, and the United States needed to rehabilitate its reputation with Asian countries that were gaining in economic and political power, we had civil rights because of black people.
Welcome back to JUC Commentaries. This is the channel where we break down the stories, controversies, and conversations that are shaking the internet right now. Today's topic is one of the most explosive discussions spreading across social media, and this is where an Asian American content creator has gone viral after claiming that immigrant communities were financially supported to open businesses in black neighborhoods, and this is sparking massive debates about wealth ownership and the economic power in America. Guys, the videos that have triggered millions of reactions online, with some people praising her for speaking out while others say the conversation is creating dangerous division between the communities. But what exactly did she say? Why are these videos exploding across the internet, and why are so many people here calling this one of the most uncomfortable conversations America has seen in years? Stay tuned, guys, because these stories get deeper and far more controversial. So let's watch these videos that I have put together for you, and credit to all the creators and broadcasters of these videos. So let's watch the videos, then I'll be back at the end of the video with a deeper commentary.
Of Asian American owned businesses operating in black communities is a huge source of tension because it is part of the daily violence faced by black people in their own communities when they are disrespected as customers, to the literal physical violence, as was the case of the salon in Brooklyn, where a black woman was locked into the salon by workers while they beat her with broomsticks, to the damage done to the psyches of particularly black children when they are accused of shoplifting. And this isn't a topic that I'm going to be able to cover in one video, but it is a conversation that I do want to start. I think that if you ask some people what was the source of the tension, they'll say the LA riots and what happened in Koreatown, but you cannot mention the LA riots without recognizing the unaliving of Latasha Harlins the year before. A 15-year-old girl who was unalived by an Asian shop owner who thought that she was shoplifting orange juice, but the money to pay for the orange juice was in her hand when she was unalived. To overlook that is to value profit and property over black bodies, which is at the root of the United States systemically racist system and capitalism. But I think that we have to go all the way back to the Civil Rights Amendment of 1964 and then the opening of Asian immigration in 1965. So in 1964, white power structure almost faced accountability to black people. Black people should have started to be able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. But instead, in 1965, the United States opened the door to Asian immigration, and redlining meant that Asian Americans were receiving business loans, but only to open businesses in black communities, and black people were still not receiving loans to open businesses in their own communities. So where you have this weaponized positionality of Asian Americans being put in black people's way, of course you are going to have resentment not only over the supplanted opportunity to open businesses in their communities, but also over the fact that the black dollar is now being paid out twice. Once when the customer pays for the goods or services, and then again when the Asian business owner removes that wealth from the black community. And I frequently heard the tension being framed as mutual misunderstanding, where these Asian shop owners didn't know about the civil rights struggles of black people, and black people were not familiar with the culture of Asian business owners. But I don't think that it can be framed as mutual misunderstanding where there is an uneven power dynamic. You have one demographic that is the business owners, and you have the other demographic that is having to pay. So where there is uneven power, I don't think that it's accurate to frame it as mutual misunderstanding. I know that you and many other black people know the answer, but it is something that I'm still processing, and it hits me really hard in the gut. And so I want people to understand that I am answering the question, what do I know? I'm not speaking for anyone. Many commenters today have pointed out how many affluent Black towns have been created and destroyed throughout United States history. And most non-Black people know about the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, Lake Lanier, but it was many Black towns. One commenter said over 60. And it's not that some Black people sometimes were able to establish a successful community that accumulated wealth. It's that Black people were consistently able to go anywhere and together establish strong communities that accumulated wealth and had education systems and businesses and were thriving. And every time it happened, people destroyed them. And then as you progress through time, it becomes less acceptable to burn and flood and massacre entire towns. So again, you have the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and the United States opens the door to Asian immigration in 1965. The United States has a long history of using immigrants to get in the way of Black people. And so I think that this system of using immigrant-owned businesses in Black communities. And another commenter asked me, why do I think that people are afraid of letting Black people build their communities and accumulate wealth and to thrive? And we see it so many times. It's because they fear revenge, because they know what they have done to Black people. But again, we have been told that if Black people wanted revenge, it would have happened already. That is not what they want. And I think that people think that the violence and exploitation and abuse of power that they have exacted upon Black people and all Black, brown, indigenous, and people of color is a universal human trait. And that if anybody has that wealth and power, then they would return that evil in kind. But it's not. It is specific to, and all Black people want is to be allowed to thrive and accumulate wealth and exist as other people have been allowed. To exercise empathy for the struggles that you face that they may not be familiar with is to help them understand. And I was hoping that you could help me understand what anti-white racism looks like. Can you tell me about how you don't know where your ancestors came from because they were kidnapped and enslaved? Or how you don't know what languages they spoke, what spiritual practices they had, or what traditional knowledge that should have been your birthright was lost, not because they were allowed to and wanted to assimilate, but because their enslavers or residential schools forced them to assimilate. Can you tell me about how your ancestors had explosives tied to them while they were building the United States railroads, and then as a show of appreciation, they were excluded from society for nearly 60 years? And could you tell me about the hundreds of towns that were destroyed, like the Black towns and Chinatowns and Japan towns, all destroyed by the same demographic? Can you tell me about the children who were unalived because they whistled at a woman or because they floated in a lake a little too far past the segregation line? And can you tell me how it was for your parents and your grandparents to be United States citizens who were put in internment camps on United States soil? Can you tell me how it was for your family to live in the back of their store because people who look like you were not allowed to purchase or rent homes? And could you tell me how it was for your parents and for you to shed blood, to be treated as human, as equal, and to be allowed to simply share the same space as other people? Can you tell me about the conversations that you have to have with your children about police interactions? And could you tell me about how your mother and your sisters and your daughters are concerned about having children because of lack of equitable access to health care, because doctors were told that people who look like you can't feel pain? Can you tell me how it feels to know that your ancestors lived here for thousands of years, but when you try to come here, you and your children are put in cages? And can you tell me how it felt when a few years ago, the president entertained having people who look like you expelled from the country again? Can you tell me what anti-white racism looks like beyond having your feelings hurt, feeling uncomfortable, and having your sense of superiority challenged? And when you're done telling me what anti-white racism feels like for you, could you please tell me why you're not fighting to end racism for everybody? Yes, this is really important. Asian Americans were redlined from opening businesses in white neighborhoods because white people didn't want Asian Americans operating in their neighborhoods and didn't want Asian Americans profiting off of white people. But because the positionality of Asian Americans is weaponized to oppress black people, Asian Americans were being given loans to open businesses in black communities, even though black people were not able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. You're obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word that the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans. Words like plague and colonizer, maybe, but not blessed. And the cell phone in my hand came from China. So I don't know if you're referencing Steve Jobs or Martin Cooper or the Finnish inventor who created the first pocket-sized telecommunication device in 1917, and you probably don't know either because your education system has left you terribly ignorant and without the critical thinking skills necessary to effectively gather information. Because you believe that most great inventions can be attributed to one white person, as opposed to recognizing that the patent system is how white people colonize intellectual property. We would not have cell phones if it wasn't for the creation of the gamma electrical cell by black inventor Henry T. Sampson. And most of our cell phones would not have microphones in them if it wasn't for the particular microphone that was created by black inventor James Edward West. The creation of the first digital network, 1G, was launched in Japan, and then black electrical engineer Jesse Russell pioneered the creation of 2G, which launched in Finland first. 3G launched in Japan, 4G launched in Norway, 5G launched in South Korea, and 30% of the world's cell phones are manufactured in China. Because we, of the global majority, recognize that collective humanity has the ingenuity and creativity of one another to thank, whereas a lot of European Americans are laboring under the delusion that the rest of us have white people to thank. And it's this narcissistic ignorance that causes people like you to do embarrassing things, like leaving comments about Europeans and cell phones on a video about systemic anti-black racism in the United States. And while that could be written off as a comedic and senile non sequitur, we recognize it as a desperate attempt to center yourself in a conversation that has nothing to do with you. The irony being that white people like to say not all white people and they shouldn't be held accountable for the misdeeds of their ancestors, yet they want to be associated with the greatness of the things that they think they invented.
What's up, family? Welcome and welcome back to the channel. So, across the social media, a growing wave of controversial discussions have exploded after an Asian American content creator began posting emotional videos about the economic systems inside the minority communities in the United States. And in her videos, guys, she claims that for decades, immigrants owned businesses were strategically encouraged and financially supported to open up stores in predominantly black neighborhoods, not just to survive but to build generational wealth, while many black communities remained uneconomically trapped. So, and the internet, guys, it has erupted about this because some viewers have called her brave and others have accused her of exposing uncomfortable truths that nobody wanted to discuss publicly. But one thing, guys, that has come out clearly is that the conversation has touched a nerve across America. And in one viral clip, guys, the creator spoke directly into the camera and said that many immigrant families arrived in America with access to rotating credit system, community-backed loans, government assistance programs, and strong cultural business networks that allowed them to establish beauty supply stores, liquor stores, nail salons, convenience shops, and restaurants in underserved urban communities. And she argues that while these systems helped immigrant groups rise economically, Black Americans were often excluded from the same opportunities due to historical barriers, discrimination, declining, and a lack of institutional investment. So the reaction online is explosive because thousands have flooded the comment section, which you can see she is posting on her videos. Some are praising her because it is take a noble courage, takes courage and boldness to come out to express this as an Asian American, and others are responding emotionally, saying that the issue was never about race alone; it's about ownership, power, and who controls the money flowing through neighborhoods. And guys, then the creator has said something that has completely shifted the conversation, and she explained that many immigrant families were taught from day one that business ownership was survival, that every dollar had to circulate inside the community, that children worked in family stores from a young age, and they are learning discipline, accounting, and sacrifice before they even become adults. And according to her, this wasn't accidental. This was cultural strategy. But critics have pushed back, and guys, many argue that reducing complex economic struggles into one narrative ignores the long story of systemic racism faced by Black Americans, while others have warned that these conversations can easily fuel division between minority groups instead of creating understanding. And some Asian Americans also rejected the greatest claims entirely, saying immigrant communities worked hard through sacrifice, struggle, and often facing poverty themselves when arriving in America. And still, guys, the videos are keeping on spreading, and millions of views, millions of arguments, millions of people suddenly debating who truly benefits from urban economies in America. And what has made this situation more dramatic is how many people began sharing their own experiences online. Former workers talked about strict family-run businesses. Others described growing up in neighborhoods where nearly every local store was owned by outsiders, while residents themselves struggled to gain access to capital or investment. And guys, this discussion is quickly evolving from race into something even bigger, and this is economic control. And now, guys, the social media feels divided straight down to the middle. One side says that these conversations are necessary because silence has prevented honest dialogue for decades. The other side fears that discussions could deepen tensions between communities that already face enough challenges in America. But regardless of where people stand, one reality cannot be denied. The videos force millions to confront uncomfortable questions about wealth ownership and opportunity distribution in America. Questions many people were never supposed to ask out loud. And now, guys, that conversation has gone viral. The internet may never stop debating it.